I'm Elizabeth Gearhart with Fireside. I'm here with Richard Squires with Life Story Memoir. Richard, what do you do and why are you doing it?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here and to talk to you about my company, Life Story. What do I do? So I write people's memoirs for them, and their books make legacies that their families will cherish for generations to come. This is an example of a recent book I did. Victor, he was a doctor. He grew up in Brooklyn, and just has an amazing story. Um, I think that everyone's story is interesting, and that people's stories should be captured and shared with their family. It's something very special to know that it's special for the family, and it's also special for the storyteller. For the storyteller, they know that they've told their story from their own words. They've captured it in a book, and that it's going to last now forever, for generations, great grandchildren, and on and on. So it's beautiful, and I think it's very good um, for a family to have the story. It helps them know where they came from. I think it kind of gives us like foundational feel, where you have like a steady foundation.
I have to say here that my daughter requested for Christmas this year that my husband and I both write up something about our past, and I'm finding very challenging to do.
It is not easy to do your own writing. I think in general, I mean, for me, I'm a writer. I also write fiction. I got two master's degrees in writing, and I've been a writing instructor for many years, and I can preach and teach writing, but I just know, and it's so much easier for me to write other people's stories than it is for me to do my own writing because the editor gets in the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why did you start? Like, this is such a cool thing. And I haven't, as I said, I haven't ever met anybody before who does memoirs. Why did you get started with this?
So I got the idea from my grandfather. I was getting my second master's degree, a master's of fine arts, and my grandfather asked me if I would write his life story for him. So I grew up listening to my grandfather's stories because he fought in World War II. He flew fighter planes in the Pacific, and he had a number of adventures and close calls that he told me about. For instance, um, he was flying in a plane on this one occasion, and the enemy used to shoot um, projectiles that would go up and explode in the air and send flak, little, chunks of metal out and to destroy the planes. And he was flying a plane, and that happened, and it destroyed his plane. It like ripped off the floor. Some of the flak went into his leg. So I was always looking at those scars as I was growing up, and it killed his co-pilot. It hit his co-pilot in the head. And my grandfather and some of the other guys bailed out. They parachuted down into the ocean. They had their floaty devices, their radio flotations that they called Mae West after the famous actress who was beautiful, and they were surrounded by sharks. The Pacific was just loaded with sharks, and he said if there was blood, it was big trouble.
Mhm.
But they called for help. They eventually got picked up. So that was one of the adventures that he told me about that I heard all the time. So, and then he had his life was really interesting. He ended up working in the meat business, in the meatpacking district of New York City. He had a client, Paul Castellano, who was one of the big mafioso. He sold meat to Peter Luger Steakhouse, which is my family's favorite restaurant. I've been there so many times growing up. And then just the stories of him meeting my grandmother and falling in love. And they had just the most wonderful, loving relationship. And then, talking to him about becoming a father, becoming a grandfather. There was so much to talk about. And I just loved it. So when he asked me if I would do that, I said, great. And so that first I was like, well, okay, ghostwriting sounds like a lot of work, a lot, because the traditional approach to ghostwriting is you interview someone, take a lot of notes, and then kind of create the prose from scratch. So
Mhm.
what I decided to do, because I didn't have that kind of flexibility, because I was working and also getting a master's, was to interview him and record it, transcribe the interview, and then edit his words and work with his words. And there's a lot of reorganization that has to be done. Redundancy has to be taken out. So it's quite a bit of labor, but I found that was a more efficient way to do it than the other way. And I brought in pictures and made a cover and got the book printed, gave it out to all my family. And then everyone was like, wow. And then that's how Life Story was born.
I wish I had that for my grandfather, because people did amazing things way back when. So he grew up on a farm in Oregon and he got a plumbing license and he ended up going to Alaska and working on oil rigs as a plumber in the Bering Sea and during storms. And I mean, people lived crazy ways back then, right? And I
Yeah.
wish I had that. Um, I think it's a wonderful thing what you're doing. I think every family should have it because so much gets lost in the telling, and you leave things out. And as it goes down, it's like that game of phone tag or whatever. You go down through the people, and it gets rearranged and lost. And I didn't know until recently that my great great grandfather, or I don't know how far back it went, actually struck it rich in the California gold mines and found gold. And that's how they had bought a whole bunch of property in Oregon for farming. So that kind of stuff just gets lost, right?
I mean, listening to that, gives me the chills.
Yeah,
What a story, to know that that's a part of your lineage, the
right.
California Gold Rush.
Yeah,
Fantastic, unbelievable. And yes, if it doesn't get told and if it doesn't get written down, it gets lost. And if it gets told but not written down, it still kind of gets lost,
yeah.
or yeah, changed, like you said, like the game of telephone. Um, but I think it's the majority of us at one point or another have had the idea that, like, it would be a great idea to write down our story, put it in a book. But most of us don't do it because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of labor. It's not easy to do. And, you might daydream about it. And, until you sit down and put the pen to paper, it's, maybe you don't realize how much work it is. But for me, one of my like MOs, the thing is that I want to make it very easy and comfortable for my clients. All they have to do is talk to me, and then I do the rest.
Right. And that's huge, quite honestly, because I do the marketing for my husband's law firm. I'm trying to tell the attorneys, look, just record it. Just record your voice. I can get it transcribed. I can edit it. I can put it on our blog. And so it's so much easier for people just to talk into a recorder than to try to write things down, and, think about how they're going to say it exactly. And then I'm assuming that you let people proofread and they can say, oh, I didn't mean to say it like that. Can you change this piece? Right. Yeah.
That happens. Yes.
Yeah.
People, uh, in addition to that, people will intend to say one thing and another thing will come out.
Yeah.
They might be thinking of a certain year, the different year comes out. And they didn't even hear themselves say the wrong year or a name, or even just other things. And people will confuse dates, and sort of rearrange the sequence, which is why the manuscript review is very important. Because in the end, this becomes a kind of everything's set in stone once the book is created. So you
Right.
want it to be accurate. So to me, no detail is too small. And I create the book and make it as good and take it as far as I can to as complete, almost, as close to finish as possible. And then it's manuscript review time.
Excellent. So
Yeah.
how long are these?
Books range. Smallest one's been maybe 70 pages, and they've gone up. I have a book that is 500 pages long. But the average is in the 200, maybe 150 to 270 range.
And a book.
And it depends on how long we talk for, how many interview hours, and that's how I base my pricing is based on the scope of the story and kind of the vision that the person has, because some of the stories are comprehensive. They're from birth to the present, but even more comprehensive than that, because I like to ask about their ancestry. And I love when people can tell me, especially if I'm talking to, say, like a senior, if I'm talking to a 90-year-old and they can tell me about their grandparents,
Wow. Yeah.
or even further back. I'm interviewing someone now, a doctor from a family whose name comes from a village in Russia, meaning that, so anyone who has that name is absolutely part of his family. There's no one else. And he knows about his family going back to the 1700s.
Wow.
And then I had another woman who knew about her family going back to back to like a thousand, with I think it was, I guess Norman the Conqueror was back then.
Wow. And that probably hasn't been captured in this way before. So that is very cool. So for 200 page, let's go through the process. You told me before it's around $5,000
Well,
for.
that's what it starts.
Starts at 5,000.
Yeah.
So should we say between 5 and 10,000 about for one, or does it go
I
higher?
mean, it goes higher. I mean, it can go as you know, if someone, so I have one client. I mean, the average like interview time is that I'll interview someone between say 6 hours and up to 10 or even 12 hours. It depends on how in depth they want to go, how comprehensive. But I have this one client who I'm interviewing him. I finished interviewing him, but I interviewed him every 2 weeks for a year. So it's 24 hours of interview.
Wow.
So that's the most expensive project that
So
I've
how
done.
much did that one cost?
That costs about $36,000.
Well, that's not bad though. I mean, a year project to cost 36,000, that's not bad at all, really. And you have something, you were telling me before, you can get as many copies as you want. You can get a few now, you can come back 5 years from now and have it reprinted.
Yeah, you have the printing is an additional cost, but it's nominal. A softcover book averages about $15 or $20, and a
Yeah,
hardcover is about $35. So, and you're getting that directly from the printer.
but to
But
have,
yeah,
yeah.
what you're paying me for is to create the book, and I include a hardcover and a softcover in that. But there's a lot of labor that goes into creating a book.
Well, as you and I were saying before, just even transcribing these videos is a lot of work. So, like the videos I do for Fireside, I transcribe them, and I'm trying to get somebody to help me do that now. But that just by itself is a lot of work. And then I do try to clean them up, and some of the software does that. But as you and I said, no matter what software you use, it can't ever get anything 100%. So there always has to be the human factor, and it takes time. I mean, to read a 200-page book is one thing that takes hours, but then to read it and fix it up and edit it, that, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a lot of work, but the end product is worth it for so many people. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, it's
I,
priceless, and
you're really inspiring me now.
thank you,
I want
thank
to
you.
get them done for my husband and myself at some point. I don't know. Maybe wait a couple years till we're a little older, but certainly not too much longer.
Well, it's never too soon. I'm working on some other ideas. Just imagine doing a book that celebrates, say, the first 18 years of your child's life, right? And you do a chapter each year.
Ooh, that's a great idea.
This is a new idea I'm working on, where I would come over to someone's house once a year and interview them and take a few pictures of them with their child, and it would be the highlights of the year of the kid growing up, the child growing up, and also reflections on what the parent has learned as a parent and how they've grown as a parent.
Right. And you could also throw in current events too. Like, this was the year that COVID hit. Everybody had to go into quarantine. And so how did it change things? And I mean, that's really, it's like a personal history, right? On record, like your own history book almost, right? Um, yeah, that's wow. So you said you've done 25 books so far?
Yes.
How long does each one take? Well, I guess it varies, but like a 200-page one, you interview over how many, like how long would you interview a person? So from the start to the finish, how long does that process take?
It was taking longer than it takes now. It was averaging it was taking probably around like 8 to 10 months to
Hmm.
get it complete from interview to printed.
Right.
And book reveal day, I like to video the book reveal when the person sees their printed book for the first time. I'd love to capture that. Part of that is the manuscript review. Sometimes clients take longer
Hmm.
than other clients.
Hmm.
It can be, sometimes it's overwhelming if it's a big book. It can be overwhelming for them. But now I aim to get everything done within 6 months because I'm putting a team together. So I was doing it all myself, but now I have someone who's doing the transcribing for me.
Good.
And I have other sets of eyes that I can run the editing by, the
Good.
manuscript by for help. I have a graphic designer who's helping me and is placing the pictures for me.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. So people give you pictures to include in the book too. So,
Yes, yes. So here's Victor's book. So you can see, and I take a lot of care in the layout
oh,
because it's very important for the pictures to be placed appropriately among the text because it more fully illustrates the story, and the pictures they have to be placed right at the content that it matches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that takes time in itself because you move one thing, everything kind of moves. You add in a new picture, you have to make readjustments. Um, yeah,
Yeah, especially when you're formatting for like a hard copy book, right?
yeah,
I bet that's a big chore. So, but that is really a documentary of a person's life, and then they can hand it down and hand it down. That is, I'm surprised you're not doing a million of these a year. Maybe you will be when the word gets out, right?
I hope so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Especially,
you know, even it won't. You know, the projects take long enough. It's a lot of work. So that when the pandemic hit and sort of, you know, business for pretty much the world kind of lulled, I still had a backlog of
yeah,
work to do.
yeah.
You know, that I was never without work to do, and I was still able to get some clients. And you know, instead of interviewing people in person, you know, I've been doing interviews over Zoom. Although before it got cold out, I was still doing interviews in person with social distancing.
Right. So let's say though somebody in Montana wants this. Will you travel to Montana and they
I,
pay for your travel, or will you bring them here, or how would that work?
I would happily travel to Montana.
Yeah.
I mean, Montana's a place I've wanted to go for a long time. I had a friend, he had all these pictures from Glacier National Park. Oh,
Yeah, Montana is beautiful. I've been there. It's you can drive and there's nobody else on the
right.
road.
I would
It's nice.
I would love that. You know, if someone would wants to, yeah, you know, pay for me to travel out there, I'll travel anywhere.
Okay.
But you know, if they don't, because um, you know, they're already spending, you know, it's not, life story is not an inexpensive thing to do. But you know, Zoom works very well.
Well, so as you expand, then Richard, would you have interviewers in Montana? So let's say somebody in Montana wants to do it, you could have an interviewer that maybe lives close by that would go interview them, and then you would bring the stuff home and finish it up in your home base. Would you consider that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had that thought. As I grow, I do want to, I mean, you know, my business could be something that can be national, and I can have interviewers and yeah, across the country in different cities. Absolutely.
Right. And then
Yeah.
the infrastructure is that you do everything else here, but they do the interviews there. And then they're either employees or maybe you sell franchises or something. So yeah, I can see this growing around the world actually. Like
It could, yeah.
not just the US.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is really fascinating. So I guess I have to ask you, do people put trauma in there? What kind of things do they tell you about that they want in their books?
I'll tell you, I am told things some, you know, fairly often that end up not making it into the final cut. People kind of will vent to me, and you know, it's kind of cathartic for people. Sometimes I'm a little bit of a therapist, I suppose. You know, not that I'm, you know, giving, you know, the guidance that a therapist would give, but people, you know, they start talking, and people always think of things when I'm doing the interview. Things come up that they hadn't thought about before very
Yeah.
often, and I try to ask those kinds of um, you know, those kinds of questions that really dig down and get down to the root of things, and not, you know, because I want it to be engaging reading, and engaging reading is made of like sensory details. So I always want to know how things look and smell. Do you have a new car? Oh, you got a new car, your first car. Okay, what year was it? What was the make, the color? But other connections can be made, you know, between people's feelings and their childhoods, and yeah, everything's cause and effect. Life is cause and effect, right? So if you are, you know, a successful business mogul, who, you know, I've had a couple clients that were like that. I'm very curious into what is one's childhood like to
Yeah.
lead to an adulthood in which you're a successful business mogul. What are your parents like? And some parents to successful business moguls were amazingly supportive, and other parents were not. They didn't believe in their son or daughter, and that's what motivated their son or daughter to become successful. So, and just these kinds of connections can be made. But yeah, sometimes people will vent, things will come out, and then in the manuscript review, they decide they'd rather not do that because it's going to be a permanent
Right.
you know, product that's going to live on in the family. And it's very often it's better to err on the side of being more positive and generous than it is to be maybe air the laundry.
Yeah, I mean, that is always the question because, as I said, my daughter asked me to write up some stuff from my early life, and there were a lot of things happened that I've never told people really, and would I want her to know that, one, and two, would I, if I give, she probably wouldn't share it with anybody, but if I were doing like a memoir like this, I think a lot of that stuff would be sanitized or left out completely, right?
Well, there's different kinds of projects. The life story that I do is typically, I mean, I have the approach that I have is it's their words. I'm editing their words, and it's intended not for commercial publication. It's intended for their family, and it's a legacy, right? But I also do ghostwriting, which is a different kind of thing, and that's more of like a commercial product. And for that, you want it to be dramatic, and you're doing it because you want to be honest. Not that there's anything not honest about the life story, but a commercial product, yeah, it's dramatic, and the stakes are higher, and you go there, you go to that place, but if a client wanted that their book to be that way, that's fine with me. I'm open to anything. It could be absolutely anything. It's whatever they want, and I always try to make recommendations and provide guidance, because if it's a gift for grandchildren,
Yeah.
that's one thing, but if
Yeah.
it's someone who has a story that they need to tell for their personal reasons, maybe it's a story of survival of some kind.
Hmm.
I've done Holocaust stories, and for those, we want to go there. We want to, and again, it's different than maybe airing laundry or talking about just something different. But for a story like a Holocaust or survival of something else, say a disease or abuse, I think you want to drive the point home, and my recommendation in that case would be to go there.
Yeah. So I guess too, like if you did put everything in there, then if you're worried about it, you could have a family member read it and they could say, I really don't think this paragraph should be in there because I don't think you want your grandkids to know this. Right. And so you can edit stuff out later, right? If you
Absolutely, it's nothing set in stone.
right.
I said it was set in stone before, but that's really once it's printed. But even once it's printed, you can do a second edition. And actually, I wanted to say, because we were talking about something before, but with the pandemic, all this new stuff coming out, kind of new experiences and perspectives due to the pandemic. I have one client, he wants to do a second edition because there's a whole pandemic chapter now.
Right. Yeah.
And
So
that's what we're doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yes, things, once it's printed, it's a physical object, but things can be changed later on.
Hmm. Well, I just think it's a wonderful service you're doing. And I wish that I had these from my ancestors, I really, and maybe we'll have them for our descendants. Who knows? But yeah, and I think the price is very reasonable for what you're doing because it's a truly custom project. And
It it is, and it's actually the most reasonable price point you're going to find,
mhm,
because if you just go online, Google ghostwriter, they start at $30,000.
right. Yeah, they're
And
expensive.
I'm offering, I started $5,000, and for the size of a book, like Victor's, which is about 300 pages, you know, hire a ghostwriter is going to cost you $50,000, but I did Victor's for much less than that.
Wow.
And I think, and it's because I have a different approach. And
Right.
yeah,
Right. You do. You have a really technologically based approach by doing the recordings and the transcriptions. And so you're using technology to reduce the price, which is what technology does a lot of time, if it's working the way it should, right?
but also the approach is that it's their words. I add some words here and there for transitions. I'm doing it's a lot of the editing takes a lot of time because it's a lot of reorganization. People repeat themselves, so it's redundancy. So people will and not speak in chronological order.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into it to try to I form their words into the most engaging narrative that they can be. But it's not, I'm not doing some things that a commercial ghostwriter is going to do.
Okay. So I want to hit one point that we talked about before. When are you going to start doing, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, the growth series, the children every year interview, uh, tracking a child's life as they grow up? When is that project going to start?
So it's a concept that I'm working on now,
Okay.
and I haven't. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I would, if I could be, if I can start that, and have it available as a service and on my website and start to market it within 4 months. That would be a good goal. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, because I can imagine parents just really loving that, you know, a lot of parents. So
I
that's
have I
good.
have two other products. One is it's around wedding celebrations.
Mhm.
So someone who they have a wedding coming up, or maybe they had, anything around that. It could be involve the honeymoon, or like the shower, or the bachelorette or bachelor party. But I would interview people
Mhm.
for a shorter amount of time than I would for a whole project. This is a lower price point, and make a beautiful, thinner sort of booklet that includes wonderful pictures and tributes. And that would be something that someone would have to, um, as a celebration of that moment. And it's the kind of thing that could be available at place settings, during the wedding. And then similar concept, but around funerals and around people who have passed, is, someone has passed. I can interview the spouse, the siblings, the children, a handful of people, and make that almost like a funeral program keepsake. Not
Mhm.
exactly a program, but a keepsake that celebrates, the one who has passed.
Those are great ideas, really good ideas. Yeah, I can see you can take this a long way. You're gonna need help, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of ideas. A lot of ideas.
Excellent. So, is there anything else you want to say about your company? Um,
Um, well, I think we covered it pretty much. But yeah, just real quickly, we're going to talk about the process, but real quickly, it's I mean, to get started, I offer a no-fee consultation. Someone can just reach out to me, send me an email, or you can contact me through my website, or you can call me. My number is 973-903-1487. And I offer a no-fee consultation. During that consultation, I collect enough information where I can then estimate how many hours of interview are required, and then I can make a proposal. And then we would talk about that. And then once the project begins, it's phase one interviews. Then I transcribe, I edit, I work with the pictures, I do the interior layout, the whole placement of the pictures, and um, I create a custom cover. And then it's manuscript review, and then we print it, and we do the book reveal, and that's basically the process in a nutshell.
Excellent. So, how often do you typically interview people? So, you say like it's like around 6 hours total. So, do you do like an hour a week or?
I usually do 2 hour interviews, sometimes even 2.5, because we often get rolling and time just flies.
Mhm.
And I'm big on, one of the big things is that I like to set a very comfortable and warm atmosphere. I like to set people at ease, and I'm told that I sort of have that about me. That people, I can get people to. I love talking with people. I love to hear people's stories and lives. I love stories, and I love connecting with people. So the interviews roll. We go 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and I always go above and beyond too. So if someone, if the agreement is to do 6 hours, it always ends up being more like 7 hours. And usually it's not every week, because once I do the interview, before I do the next interview, I like to transcribe it, read back through it, become very familiar with it, so that I am very familiar with what we covered and I know where we're going, and I can send some questions ahead of time. So it's usually so interviews are usually about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks apart.
So, yeah. So, I mean, if you figure what you would pay a psychiatrist to sit there and listen to you talk about yourself, I'm just kidding. But seriously, though, to have somebody just sit there and listen to you tell your life story, I mean, that is cathartic, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And I'm sure that you're a very good listener, because otherwise you wouldn't get all this business that you're getting. That's huge because, who are you going to go? Nobody, most people don't want to listen to you talk about yourself for hours, but you do.
I,
So,
I love it. I love it.
yeah.
We laugh. Sometimes we cry. Uh, we cover it. We cover it. And I have a, I can. I have a sense of the arc of the story of the life,
Mhm.
and I'm keeping track of where we are, what we've covered, what we need to fill in, all that. So I really guide the storyteller, and all they have to do is talk.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I try to do that on a smaller scale with these fireside interviews, but they're about business. But what you're doing is amazing, just amazing. And
I
I'm
learn
gonna
a lot.
what?
I learn a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep your name at the top of my Rolodex for when I'm ready. Definitely. So excellent. Well, thank you, Richard. And your website is life
www.lifestorymemoir.com.
okay, lifestorymemoir.com.
Yeah.
So excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy to be here.
Yeah.